Nike has a problem. Actually, Nike has a bunch of problems. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I made a video recently where I talk about Nike's running line restructure and some of the problems that they're running into, both corporate and in the running line. If you're interested, link in the description for that. But the problem I'm referencing here is with Nike's elite runners. Now, elite runners are important because they're the ones at the cutting edge of racing, World Major Marathon, racing in the top line gear, the latest and greatest, the Vaporflies and the Alphaflies. And largely, the Nike Elites have pretty much given up on running in the Vaporfly 3, and they're choosing to run in the Vaporfly Next Percent 2, a shoe that is 2 years old now. Now, initially, I thought this was because the Vaporfly 3 was new. Last spring, in the spring 2023 marathon season, the Vaporfly was just releasing, so I figured a lot of the elites didn't get a chance to train in the Vaporfly 3, so they stuck with what they know, and they raced in the Vaporfly 2. Totally understandable. However, by the fall 2023 World Major Marathon season and this recent spring 2024 World Major Marathon season, we saw even less Vaporfly 3s. We saw a lot of Alphafly 3s, which I'll get to in a moment, but we saw very few Vaporfly 3s, and in fact, the Nike elite runners who were choosing to run in the Vaporfly all were racing in the Vaporfly 2 and a couple Vaporfly Next Percent 1s, the original one, a shoe that's over 3 years old now. If we tally up all the Nike podiums from Tokyo 2023 through London 2024, we get this: 9 podiums for the Alphafly 3, 7 podiums for the Vaporfly Next Percent 2, remember, a 2-year-old shoe, and 3 for the Vaporfly 3. And just because I know you're curious, you put the Evo 1 on here, you get 11 podiums for the Evo 1. So Adidas is doing pretty well. And this is the problem I'm referring to. The Nike elites have been telling Nike, it seems, that they don't like the Vaporfly 3. And frankly, now that Nike has a marathon super shoe that's current generation that's doing very well in the Alphafly 3, it also seems like they've given up on the Vaporfly 3. But what I've been wondering is, why is that? Now, I've been a big fan of the Vaporfly 3. I love this shoe. I think this is the best Vaporfly for me. Yeah, and I've run in all of them. I bought 3 pairs of these last year. I raced in them. I trained in them. This was my shoe of the year for 2023. I stand by the fact that I think this is a better shoe, a better Vaporfly for more runners. An average runner is going to do much better in the Vaporfly 3 than any of the previous Vaporflies. But the things that make this a good shoe for average runners like me or you is what makes it not so good for elites. Now, what is that? We've heard that this is less aggressive, it's less propulsive, but what does that really mean? If we look at both of these shoes, the Vaporfly 3 and the Vaporfly 2, we realize that not a lot has changed between these two shoes. They're still both full ZoomX midsoles. They both still have a carbon fiber plate. In fact, they're the same Nike Fly plate between the two shoes, meaning the same geometry, the same propulsive spoon effect in the forefoot. They're both low plate configuration shoes. They both have lightweight uppers. They're both very lightweight overall. And overall, not a lot has changed here, but there are some subtle detail differences between these two shoes, and that's what's making a big difference for the Nike Elites. The more I've thought about this, and I've actually spent time running in the Vaporfly 3 and the Vaporfly 2 recently to really test this, I've really come down to 3 primary differences that make the Vaporfly 3 feel less aggressive over the Vaporfly 2 or the original Vaporfly Next Percent 1. The first area is the fit, this upper. Now, I love the upper of this shoe. It's one of the things I love about the Vaporfly 3 because it fits my weird foot, which is neither wide nor narrow, but I do have a very high arch and a very high volume foot. So the extra room in the midfoot, the extra room in the toe box really fit me well. This upper fits my foot perfectly. I've had 0 problems with this. I've had 0 toe trauma. I've trained in this. I've raced in this. I've had absolutely no problems with this upper, which is something I can't say about the upper of other Vaporflies, specifically the Vaporfly 2. This upper was very much a toe killer for me, but it is a more aggressive, tighter fitting race fit upper. It's not as aggressive as this, the Vapor Weave in the original Vaporfly. This is a very, very tight and secure race fit, but it's close. The Vaporfly 2 has the best of the fit of this shoe, but in a more breathable upper textile that I think fits more racer's feet. It gives you a much tighter, more secure fit. Now, this shoe is very finicky to get on your foot, as all Vaporflies are, but getting this upper in the right place, getting the tongue in the right place, does take some effort. But once you do, racing this shoe, I never really had massive problems other than some toe issues because there's just not a lot of volume in the toe box of this shoe. But overall, I think that's why the elites are preferring this shoe, because it gives you the breathability that's built in the Vaporfly 3, but it's still giving you the race fit of the Vaporfly 1 in a shoe that just fits like a race shoe should. It almost fits like a track spike in many ways. Not quite as tight, but it is a true race fit. And this distinguishes it from the Vaporfly 3. Even though the dimensions of the Vaporfly 2 are the same as the Vaporfly 3, I think the next thing about this shoe that really is why elites are preferring it is that this shoe feels like a race flat. This shoe feels very minimal compared to all of the current super shoes that we have on the market right now. In fact, this shoe feels pretty minimal compared to this shoe, and this shoe only has 2 more millimeters of foam, really only in the forefoot. But this shoe runs very much like a very minimal racing flat, which is kind of remarkable because it's not. There is a lot of foam in this shoe. Secondly, about the feel of this shoe, the fact this feels like a racing flat, I think this outsole, this big, thick chunk of rubber that's in the forefoot of this shoe actually makes this shoe run very differently. This big piece of rubber that's in the forefoot of this shoe gives a platform to land on, but more importantly, push off. It almost feels like it contains the Zoom X that's above it and doesn't let the Zoom X kind of spill out too much, because Zoom X is a very compressive foam. But this big, thick piece of rubber in here really gives you a platform to push into the ground and push off of the ground. So I also think that's why the elites are preferring this shoe, is just that toe-off feel of the shoe, because it does feel much more propulsive because it has this bigger, thicker platform underfoot touching the ground. But this big, thick piece of rubber in the forefoot of the Vaporfly 2 is also what makes this shoe feel very slappy or harsh for average runners, which is why I think Nike ultimately switched the forefoot rubber in the Vaporfly 3 to this much thinner, waffled piece of rubber that has cutouts between the waffles that gives you a much softer, more compliant feel to the ground. By also putting the thinner piece of rubber on here, they managed to put 2 more mil of Zoom X foam in the forefoot of the shoe, which again makes the shoe feel softer. So overall, this shoe has a much softer forefoot, which still rolls you forward because of the plate, but it does feel squishy at times. Now, I've done 200s and 400s in this shoe, and my 200 or 400 pace is on the slower end of an elite marathon pace, and this shoe feels very squishy, very soft to me. I don't really like doing 200s or 400s in this shoe. You can do them, but it's not my first choice. But doing 200s or 400s in this shoe feels powerful, it feels strong. If you're up on your toes and you have really good form, this shoe really rewards putting all that power into the ground and rolling and pushing off on this big, beautiful piece of rubber. I think elites prefer that. And staying on the midsole differences and the way this shoe feels, it runs like a flat, I think we also have to credit the Zoom X foam that's in this shoe. Now remember, this shoe is over 2 years old. The Zoom X in this shoe is from 2019 to about 2021. This is the older, more styrofoamy feel of Zoom X. If you run in Zoom X a long time, you know that recently, in the past 2 to 3 years, Zoom X has become much more rubberized. The Zoom X that's in the Vaporfly 3 is a much more rubbery type feel. Even when you wear into this foam, there's much more rubber feel to it. It doesn't look like styrofoam once you wear the coating off of the foam. But when you wear the coating off of the foam in this, you can look into this foam and you see that the cell structure is very styrofoamy. You can even, holding the shoe and pressing the foam, I can hear differences in this foam. I just think the older Zoom X foam is probably less squishy, I'm not going to say it's firmer because it's still Zoom X. It's still a foam you sink into. But I think the way the older Zoom X foam works with the plate and how it isn't so rubbery in its feel gives this shoe, again, a much more propulsive, positive ride. That's, I think, one of the biggest components why people say this is a more aggressive ride. And that brings me to the last point of why I think elites prefer this shoe, and it's that this shoe has a smaller sweet spot. Now, as an average runner, if you've ever raced in this shoe, especially a half or full marathon, and your form hasn't been optimal or it's fallen apart in the later stages of the race, you know this shoe can be very, very harsh to run in. This shoe likes you to be up on your toe, to have very good, perfect, strong form. Once you kind of fall off, start landing more mid-forward or even heel in this shoe, forget it. This shoe is going to punish you each step. But for an elite who is up on their toes or at least has really good form and strength, they're very well trained, much better than us as average runners, that smaller sweet spot rewards them much better. But I also think that's why Nike really extended the sweet spot of the Vaporfly 3 to, again, be much broader. If you've raced in this shoe and you've fallen apart or your form hasn't been optimal, this shoe will kind of work for you. It's not going to punish you every step. Get out of line to a certain point, it will start to punish you, but that point is much, much further down the line than anything you would ever feel in this shoe. So this shoe has a much bigger sweet spot, which again, I think benefits more average runners. But again, elites just don't like it because it's too accommodating. It's not aggressive enough. So I think those three things together are what are making people say this is a more aggressive shoe. And I would agree, having run in this recently, doing some 1K repeats and some 400s, I definitely notice it. And I hadn't run in this shoe for over a year. And, comparing it to a workout in this shoe, my times are similar. This is a little faster, but this shoe felt faster. This shoe felt like the racing flat I remember the Vaporfly feeling like. I'm going to admit, I kind of missed that, though I do think this is the better shoe for me because there's just more foam in it. It's more accommodating for not optimal form, but this definitely does feel like the faster shoe. And again, I do think that's why elites are picking this over the Vaporfly 3. Now, it seems like Nike has completely moved on from the Vaporfly 3. They're not forcing their pros and elites to race in it. And frankly, it doesn't look like they're really doing anything with the Vaporfly 3. Now, we have seen some very low-res and blurry images of a Vaporfly 4 prototype leaked out there. And what we can make out about the Vaporfly 4 is that it is a very, very different shoe. Completely different geometry, completely different foam setup. Design language-wise, it doesn't look like it has anything to do with the Alphafly 3 or the Vaporfly 3. It seems like it's a completely new direction. So obviously Nike is investing in whatever comes next for the Vaporfly 4. We should see the Vaporfly 4 next year because it's an alternating year between the Alphafly and the Vaporfly. This year was Alphafly, next year should be Vaporfly. Now another shoe that's coming up in conversation about Vaporfly 4 is the recently revealed Streakfly 2. Now if you want to see photos of these shoes, the Vaporfly 4 leaks and the Streakfly 2, go check out his Instagram account, The Secret Shoe. He posts all of this stuff. He can post stuff on Instagram, which I'm not going to put in a video. Go follow him. You'll see all of this stuff. But what we have seen in the Streakfly 2 is a much more aggressive Streakfly. A Streakfly that looks like a hybrid of the Alphafly 3 and the Vaporfly 3 from a design language and the silhouette of the midsole, but now with a carbon fiber plate, much more stack height that looks like it's only 5 or 6 mils less than the Vaporfly 3 with a very aggressive toe spring, making the Streakfly 2 a much more aggressive Vaporfly 3 in many ways. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see Streakfly 2s on the feet of elite runners at world major marathons, but I think some people will try, maybe not at the elite level, but at sort of the next tier down. I think you will see people racing marathons and half marathons in this Streakfly 2 because it looks like a shoe that's designed to do that, not just go after 5 and 10Ks. So it will be interesting where Nike's actually going with that shoe and what that shoe feels like on foot. But it's also, I think, interesting to me that Nike is holding on to some aspects of the Vaporfly 3, but making it more aggressive. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.